Sherry Sensibrian, the presiding officer of this Speech Language Pathologist and Audiologist Advisory Board. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:03. Just as a reminder, unless you're speaking, please mute your microphone just so we don't get any background noise. And one of the things that's always hard for me to remember is that each time you speak, please announce your name, because we have people who may not be able to see who it is that's saying whatever you're saying. So we will start and ask Delia to do the roll call first, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sharice Andrews,
Present.
Stacy Poteet,
Present.
Cyprian, the presiding officer
Elizabeth
of
Sterling,
the Speech Language Pathologist and Audiologist Advisory Board.
Present.
And I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Dr. Kristen Culp,
Present.
Dr. Tammy Kemp,
Present.
Cheval Bryant,
Present.
and presiding officer Sherry Sensibrian.
Present.
And
Thank
we
you.
have a quorum.
Great, we have a quorum, and we are going to start with some board member introductions. So, Delia, do you want to call on people individually to do that?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, may I introduce our Commissioner Lori High
Oh, yeah.
and to all the board members. Ms. High, would you like to say a little something about yourself, please?
Hi, yes, thanks for having me. I've been on the commission for a little over a year now, and just happy to serve Texans after being retired for about 3 years from the nursing field. My husband and I moved here from Dallas about 3 years ago. We're right outside of Austin, about 45 minutes outside of Austin. And I did get to listen to your last meeting or watch your last meeting on video. So I appreciate being able to do that. And I plan to do that as we go through the rest of my tenure anyway. And appreciate what you do in your profession. I didn't have a lot of contact with speech pathologists and audiology, except that we did refer out especially when I worked in neurology for swallow studies and mainly with the older adults. But again, I appreciate what you do on the advisory board too, and lending your expertise. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm interested in your discussion. I'm sure you're going to be discussing some of the newer legislation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. All right, we are going to do introductions because we have a new board member. Her name is Stacy Poteet. So we can start off with her. Ms. Poteet.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Stacy Poteet, and I am serving as a community representative and parent representative. I have a soon-to-be 26-year-old son on the autism spectrum. I have a master's in special education, but I'm serving on this board because this profession changed our family's life. So very grateful to all of you who have been a part of changing families' lives, so including ours. So thank you. Honored to serve.
Thank you.
And I have to say, I've known Stacy since for 23 of those 26 years of her son's life. So I had asked her, she's such a good representative of the people that we work with and what we do that makes a difference for the children and adults we work with and for their family members. So I'm grateful she was willing to apply to serve as a consumer member.
Sharice Andrews.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharice Andrews. I'm currently working at the University of Houston. So I have kind of a dual assignment. I teach undergraduate classes, and then I also work in our clinic here on campus, and our clinic is underwritten by the United Way. So we see anyone from the community with or without insurance just on United Way sliding fee scale. And it's a pleasure to be here and nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. Elizabeth Sterling.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I have
Ms. Sterling, you froze.
I did. Do you have me now?
A little bit, you're freezing up. Maybe if you can log
Oh.
off and log back in, maybe that'll help.
Yes, let me try that real quick.
Okay. While she's doing that, we'll go on to Dr. Kristen Culp.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kristen Culp. I am in the Austin area. I've been here since 2000, coming from Houston before that. I'm an audiologist, now working with Estes Audiology in the whole Texas corridor, Central Texas corridor, as a manager of the clinical team for the last 4 years. And before that, I was in clinic with patients for 25 years. So I have a lot of experience in certain areas of audiology, not as much as interaction with speech pathology, because I've done mostly hearing aids, although we do refer out, of course. My husband and I are empty nesters and spend time between Austin and Rockport, where we have a home as well. And I just have to get him off the boat of fishing when I need to hang out with my husband. But otherwise, we have pretty good time.
Thank you. Dr. Tammy Camp.
I'm Tammy Camp. I'm a pediatrician at Texas Tech in Lubbock, and I serve as the physician representative on this board. So,
Thank you. Cheval Bryant. Did we lose Miss Bryant? Oh, there she is. Miss Bryant? Are you muted? Okay. Why don't you log off and log back in, see if that'll help? Because I can't hear you. Okay, Miss Sterling, would you like to continue?
So hopefully this is better. I was on my phone and had half a bar, but I'm now on my computer. Sorry. So Elizabeth Sterling, and as I stated, I have 25 years in the field of special education, have worked in public schools, have worked in Texas School for the Deaf for many, many years, working with speech audiology. And now I have moved over. I'm actually working for a program at Manor ISD called SESI Schools, and it's a specialized program for students with autism and emotional challenges. And so we do have some hard of hearing students here as well. We're a brand new program, and I'm the director there, and I'm a member at large of this committee.
Great. Okay, Miss Bryant, let's try you again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that was so weird. I don't know what happened. You could hear me at first and then it just stopped. Anyway, so I'm Cheval Bryant. I'm a speech pathologist and I'm the head of school at a special school for students with speech impairments and language-based learning disabilities. I oversaw the speech therapy services in Houston ISD for about 7 years, and then I was the head of school at the parish school in Houston. And actually, about a year ago, I moved to New York City, and I'm the head of school of a very similar school as the parish school out here, which I was so grateful to find. And I moved out here because my daughter is a ballet dancer, and she is training at American Ballet Theater. So I'm so grateful that I was allowed to continue on this board and stay engaged in Texas licensing legislation and board rules. So I'm so excited to be here. And I do plan to be back to Texas after I get my daughter. She's only 16, so when she gets a little bit older and can manage on her own, I do plan to come back to Texas. So I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. And presiding officer, Sherry Sensibrian.
Hi, I just celebrated my 40th year here at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center. I'm old enough that I'm part of the original group that proposed licensure in the 70s and in the early 80s, and then we got licensure in our state in 1984. So it's been around a while. I've been presiding officer under the Department of State Health Services and then under TDLR, and I'm always happy to help out in whatever way. So
Thank you.
and Delia, I think now we are ready for the open government training, and Nick was going to do that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Nick?
Yes. Hi there. Hi again. Let me just bring up the slides and thank you, everyone, for just a little bit of patience. I appreciate it. And I know for some of you, this may be a refresher. And so I appreciate your continued attention. Hopefully everyone's able to see this wonderful blue background and our logo and the all that other information. If not, please let me know so I can back up and make any technical adjustments I need to. So thank you for that introduction. My name is Nick Lalis, and I am Assistant General Counsel here at the department. And today we're going to be talking about three key components of open government law and administrative law in the state of Texas. And taken together, they represent protections for both the due process rights of our licensees as well as the public's interest in open government and transparency in relation to the actions and undertakings of what the department does and its internal sort of ordering and functions. So we'll be going through three different bodies of law this morning. Let me see if I can go ahead and get it to advance. There we go. We're going to start off by talking about the Open Meetings Act, which I know everyone has some familiarity with because we're all here this morning. And then we'll move on to the Administrative Procedures Act that governs other important actions that are undertaken by the department and the commission, of course, in relation to enforcement, for example, or rulemaking. So it really deals with official actions undertaken or rules made by the department and the commission. And then finally, to round it out, the Public Information Act, which is, of course, the mechanism by which members of the public can ask for information from a governmental entity. And generally speaking, that information is presumed to be open, but of course, exceptions apply. I'll also preface this by saying there will be at the last slide of each section, there will be some resources enumerated. Of course, contacting for members of the advisory board, contacting the general counsel's office is an excellent step to undertake if you have questions. In addition to that, there are resource and guidance documents available from the Texas Attorney General and that are on their website. And in relation to the Open Meetings Act, for example, and the Public Information Act, if there are questions that people have, be it a member of the board, be it a member of the public that's listening right now, there are open government hotlines that anyone can consult and call over there at the Texas AG's office if you have a question for them. So that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. Please feel free to interrupt if I don't see your hand raised or if I don't recognize a question. Please let me know, and Delia, if you can, if you see me kind of just speeding along, please let me know too, so I make sure I answer any questions that we have. So we're talking about first the Open Meetings Act, and this is, as it says, nuts and bolts. This is kind of a higher level approach. Like I said, there are guidance documents that are hundreds of pages of law and related analysis that are available on the AG's website. So this is kind of a higher level analysis, but does discuss the key concepts in relation to all of those laws I just talked about. And so let's get started, like I said, on open meetings. So the purpose of TOMA, or the Texas Open Meetings Act, is to ensure open and transparent government, but with the emphasis really being on the official actions and deliberations of a governmental body. So when a governmental body does something official or considers and discusses something official. The Act requires meetings of governmental bodies to be open to the public and preceded by public notice of time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. And the provisions of the Act are mandatory and are to be liberally construed in favor of open government. And that's actually consistent with the Public Information Act, where usually if a court or the Attorney General is examining a legal question, they will construe the Open Meetings Act and Public Information Act liberally in favor of giving the public information and access. So if you ever have a question and you're thinking about it, or if I'm thinking about it as an attorney and trying to assess what a court or the Attorney General might do, if there's a close call, usually the safer bet is to disclose more information and be more open. But of course, that's has to be subject to all the other provisions in the law, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So key concepts for the Open Meetings Act. First is quorum, and quorum is usually a simple majority of the members of an advisory board, committee, governmental body, and that simple majority can be changed. For example, if there's a specific statutory change to it, but that would have to be something laid out in the law. So generally speaking, a quorum of a governmental body is going to be the majority of members. So a quorum of a governmental body, including an advisory board or committee, has to meet in order to take official action. So a quorum has to have a meeting. And if less than a quorum meets, the board or committee may have discussion but may not take official action. So for example, today, if we didn't get quorum, we could still receive information. But what couldn't occur is, for example, a final recommendation on a rule package or other official actions that would require a presence of a majority or quorum and then a vote, for example, to be undertaken to do that official action. Another key concept is deliberation, and that means a verbal or written exchange amongst a quorum of a governmental body. So these concepts kind of build on each other. It's a verbal or written discussion amongst a quorum or between a quorum of a governmental body and another person concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. For example, if during a public comment period or interaction period with the members of the public, there's a discussion between members of this board and a member of the public, that would still be construed as deliberation, even though it's between members of the governmental body and a member of the public. And that can also occur if a quorum is present and receiving information from the public if the governmental body creates that opportunity. So for example, if we specifically announced to the public that we were collecting information and that this advisory board was collecting information, wanted input from the public, that could be considered deliberation. Even if there's not much discussion between the board members, the act of creating an opportunity for the public to be heard and the presence of a quorum could create deliberation. And then finally, meetings. So a meeting occurs anytime a quorum of a governmental body engages in deliberation regarding public business or public policy over which the governmental body has supervision or control, or anytime the body takes formal action. So anytime a formal recommendation is made, or for example, this agency or other agencies, when the commission takes final action concerning a case or something like that, that would be something that would need to happen in a meeting because it is a formal action. And as I said, these concepts build on each other. So we've got a meeting depending on the presence of a quorum and engaging in deliberations. They're all linked together. So how we protect the public's interest in knowing what the government's going to do is by providing adequate notice. So for example, TDLR has to provide advance written notice of the date, time, place, and subject of each meeting held. For example, this meeting or a commission meeting. There's an agenda that is posted, and that notice of that agenda and notice of the meeting has to be filed with the Texas Secretary of State at least 7 days before the meeting and has to be posted by the Secretary of State and TDLR. And the board or committee that the agenda pertains to cannot engage in discussions about a subject not included in the agenda. And so this is an important and salient point, especially when we talk about dealing with, for example, members of the public who bring up good and salient information for us during public comment period, that we can receive information from them. But if there's not a noticed item on the agenda pertaining to what their discussion is about, usually we are limited in what we can do to receiving information and perhaps discussing a further agenda item, but we cannot take official action outside of the bounds of the agenda. All right, so what about less formal occasions such as social functions, workshops, conventions, which I know a lot of professionals attend? So keeping in mind that a meeting occurs whenever a quorum engages in discussion about an issue within the governmental body's jurisdiction, can members ever meet in an informal setting without violating the Open Meetings Act? The answer is yes. There are specific exceptions defined in statute that are kind of like safe harbor almost for certain types of interactions that one would expect members of a governmental body to engage in. So they can engage in conversation that's incidental to these events But what they can't do is use those events as an opportunity to engage in deliberation. Because if they do, for example, at a workshop, a quorum is present and they start talking about business within the jurisdiction of their board or commission, then that would be a deliberation within the meaning of the act, and then that could be a potential violation. So a good rule of thumb is these informal kind of occasions, social functions, conventions, workshops. It's okay to have discussions there, but they have to be incidental to the event, and they cannot be the sort of deliberations one would expect to occur within an open meeting. And of course, no formal action can be taken. And so some key points to remember, just have awareness of any situation occurring outside of a meeting where a quorum is present and engaging in discussion. Don't engage in substantive conversations about board business or committee business or policy when a quorum is involved and you're outside of an officially noticed and scheduled meeting. And just be aware of the walking quorum. And we'll jump to that concept right now. A walking quorum occurs when fewer than a quorum of members engage in discussion about official business and then communicate those discussions to other members. So we just doing the math here, if for example, a 5-member board, two members meet and discuss something, and then one of those two meets and discusses it with another one, then we have effectively a conversation between a majority of the board, 3 members, if they're a 5-member board, for example, and they'd be discussing matters within their kind of jurisdiction policy. So that could be a walking quorum, essentially. While fewer than quorum members participate in the initial communication, so that one-on-one communication, subsequent communication with other members will result in a quorum discussing official business outside of a public meeting. And so the good rule of thumb here is if it feels like it could be a potential violation of the Open Meetings Act, it might be, and so it's best to avoid it there. Or if you have a question, to contact someone in general counsel. An example, like I just gave, a 5-member advisory board, 2 members exchange phone calls and emails expressing thoughts on an upcoming rule change and exchange research that they have each performed individually regarding the issue. One of the board members subsequently forwards the exchange to another member, so an email exchange. The members have now engaged in a walking quorum by engaging in a small group discussion out of a properly noticed board meeting. And walking quorums can occur through a variety of means, conference calls, video conferences, hallway discussions, emails, texts, and other new technologies. And it's especially perhaps important to highlight the role that email communications can play in this, because it is very simple to forward an email chain or accidentally send an email chain that includes discussion, for example, between 1 member, 2 members, to more people. And so it's important to be vigilant that none of those discussions, even if they are kind of in isolation, happen, and that there's never any way to construe a communication as including members of a quorum, even kind of in the aggregate. I'll put it that way. The walking quorum concept combined with newer technologies such as Twitter, Facebook, its IMs raise new issues about meetings in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And there are plenty of ways to accidentally violate the Open Meetings Act. For example, if there's a Facebook page or a Twitter thread and a majority about a matter within the jurisdiction of an advisory board, and the majority of the board is on that thread discussing what could be considered public business or items within their jurisdiction, that could be a violation, and probably would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So it's especially important to be mindful of that discussion, even if it's on Twitter and it's kind of open to the public, that the formalities of TOMA could still apply to it. So to avoid a walking quorum, members should not meet in small groups to discuss board or committee business, then communicate this discussion to other members. Send emails or text messages to a quorum of members regarding official business, even if each email is addressed and sent to each member individually. Create posts on social media about board business where a likelihood exists that a quorum of members could participate in those discussions, or ask a quorum of members, even on an individual basis, for feedback or comments on matters within the jurisdiction of a board outside of a public meeting. That can also be referred to as polling, which is kind of like conducting an informal vote to assess what the outcome of a vote would be. And so that's another thing to avoid, of course. There are some guidelines for how open sessions have to be conducted. Like I said, we have to stick to the agenda, as does every other governmental body, and the items on it. During the public comment portion of the meeting, members of the public are given an opportunity to speak, and the presiding officer can set reasonable limits on comment. A member of the public or a member of the board may raise a subject that has not been included on the agenda. However, any discussion of the subject must be limited to a proposal to place the subject on the agenda for a future meeting. So if a member of the public does raise a good point about something that should be discussed and it merits further deliberation, it's worth future deliberation, saying that we want to add that to a future agenda is appropriate. Best practices, and this kind of reiterates some of the stuff we've already said. To avoid violating the act on the basis of insufficient notice, we should limit those discussions we have in a meeting to specific items on the agenda. Avoid allowing discussions related to specific agenda items to wander into new issues, which is sometimes difficult to do, so we have to do a little bit of self-policing there. Not respond to or discuss issues that are raised during public comment, but which are not on the agenda. And specifically identify items for future agendas and communicate those items to TDLR staff. And that serves our interest both in preventing a potential violation of the Open Meetings Act if they're raised during a meeting, and ensures that if there is an important item, it is properly noticed to the public so it can be discussed at a later meeting. So there are penalties and some remedial actions that can happen for Open Meetings Act violations. Any interested person, including the media, for example, can petition courts to stop actions that are taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So it can be anybody. They don't have to be someone who's harmed, for example, by an action undertaken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. And specifically, an action taken in violation of the act is voidable. So if, for example, this board, not that they ever would, or y'all ever would, but did take an action in violation of the Open Meetings Act, that action could be overturned, essentially could be voided. There are also criminal penalties, which are very serious, related to breaking the Open Meetings Act. So members who knowingly participate in a walking quorum or knowingly participate in a meeting closed to the public are subject to misdemeanor criminal penalties. The penalties could be a fine of $100 to $500, confinement in county jail for 1 to 6 months, or both the fine and jail time. So there are penalties in addition to civil remedies for violations of the Open Meetings Act. And so, again, best practices: avoiding communications involving a quorum outside of an officially properly noticed meeting, and during those meetings, making sure we stick to the agenda are kind of the two key things to emphasize. Like I said, there are plenty of resources on the Open Meetings Act, including the Texas Attorney General website, guidance documents, or the General Counsel's office, as well as, like I said, the government Open Government Hotline usually is used by governmental entities, but if there are questions, sometimes it is another resource. All right, so now that we've discussed how we conduct ourselves in meetings, we're going to discuss a little bit more about rulemaking and other official actions undertaken by governmental bodies through the Administrative Procedure Act. The purpose of the Texas APA is to establish minimum standards of uniform practice and procedure for state agencies and provide for public participation and transparency during rulemaking. A rule is a statement of general applicability by a state agency that implements, interprets, prescribes law or policy, or describes the procedure or practice requirements of the state agency. We're all probably here aware of what rules are and are aware we're going to be discussing some potential amendments to some rules later today. It excludes a statement only related to the internal management or organization of a state agency, not affecting private rights or procedures. So like just purely internal policy matters and management aren't rulemaking if they only apply to how TDLR, for example, is managed and run. A rule includes a new rule, an amendment to an existing rule, or repeal of an existing rule. So taking action that would change a rule or create a new one or get rid of one. That is all considered rulemaking. There are many sources for rulemaking: legislative changes, advisory boards and their recommendations, internal staff assessment, and four-year rule review, which is another process we'll discuss a little bit, as well as rule petitions where members of the public can ask, for example, TDLR to make changes to our rules. Rule petitions can be submitted by interested persons to state agencies requesting the adoption of a rule. There are some criteria for who an interested person can be. And there is a specific prescribed rulemaking process that TDLR follows in accordance with kind of the structure set out in the APA that incorporates review by multiple different entities. For example, with us at TDLR, the governor's office, the advisory boards, eventually proposal of rules once they've gotten through that stage by publication in the Texas Register, and then receipt of public comment and response to public comment. And finally, after all of that's done, adoption, hopefully by the commission, and subsequent publication again, and then an effective date. So there is a process by which the public gets apprised of any rule changes. They are vetted and input is gained through a variety of different means, especially here at TDLR, such as advisory boards and members of the public. And after that process is done, the rule is adopted, published, and becomes effective. There's also a process that is required for review of existing rules that can be used to recommend changes or gain public input or advisory board input, for example, over existing rules. Generally speaking, it is on a 4-year schedule. The department publishes intent to review and receives comments similar to the way it does for regular rulemaking. We review comments, and then the commission reviews the rule filings and comments, and then generally, assesses the readoption of the rule, and then readopts it, hopefully. And then the advisory board gets presented with any comments and they recommend changes. So sometimes changes come up, or recommended changes come up through that rule review process that are useful in further rulemaking. And there are a lot of additional resources related to rulemaking that are found kind of the same website, same general place. So the Texas AG has a handbook on administrative law. There are statutes, of course, that govern it. If you're interested in rule history or some of the documents related to rulemaking, of course, the Secretary of State website for the Texas Register is important, and any questions can be directed, of course, to the General Counsel's office. And finally, kind of rounding it out, we'll talk about the Public Information Act, which is my specialty usually. So I'm happy to talk about that today. And again, it's important to kind of note some of these pieces of legislation, like the PIA and the Public Information Act and the Open Meetings Act, did kind of emerge from the Sharpstown scandal. So they really are motivated by this kind of spirit and creed of ensuring openness in Texas government. And that's what you'll see when we discuss the Public Information Act. So the PIA, which some people call the Open Records Act, I call it the PIA, the Public Information Act, just kind of shorthand. It's intended to allow public access to information about the affairs of the government and official acts of public officials and employees. By default, it makes every piece of information that's compiled, assembled, created, maintained, for example, by a governmental entity, public. However, and that can be information in any form. It can be electronic communications, for example, if it's stored on any device and relates to the performance of an official duty. That is within the definition of public information. And that definition of public information as information that's created, assembled, maintained, compiled in the course of official duties is applicable to information wherever it lives. And generally speaking, when examining whether or not something is subject to the act, it's important to consider again that the act is construed liberally in favor of granting access to information. So if there's a question about whether or not something's covered by the PIA, usually the answer is if you think it is, it probably is, if it relates to official duties or official business of a state agency such as TDLR. So there are things a member of the public or another state agency, for example, has to do to request information under the Public Information Act. And then there are things that y'all should be aware of in relation to what constitutes a request. If you receive a written request for information or correspondence that looks like a public information request, and it's important to note there are no magic words. So someone doesn't have to say this is a public information request or say I am writing to you under Chapter 552 of the Government Code. They can just say I want this information, for example, or I would like a copy of this information. Then if you receive correspondence like that, please forward the request to the General Counsel's office and the Open Records team as soon as possible. And in turn, if information is requested from you by the Open Records team, please respond as soon as possible because there are some pretty strict deadlines in the Public Information Act that govern charging for the information, for example, that govern whether or not things can be excluded or should be excluded from production because they are under an exception to disclosure. And of course, just if there's redactions that need to be done, those take time, and we want to make sure that we are responsive and quick to members of the public. So getting that information to OGC's Open Records team fast and asking any questions as quickly as you can is critical to their success, and I know they really appreciate it. I just brought up one of those deadlines. Prompt response. TDLR must respond to the request as soon as possible, but not later than 10 business days after receiving the request. So that's, for example, one of those deadlines that I just mentioned, where some official action has to take place with a request within 10 business days of getting it, which is why we place such an emphasis on getting information, being able to analyze what we need to do as an agency with it. Generally speaking, we can't ask someone why they want the records. We can ask for clarifications through the OGC records team. So for example, if a request were to come in and we just don't know, for example, what date range someone is seeking information on, or there's a lack of clarity regarding a name, or there's a common name or something like that, we need to clarify it. OGC can clarify that with a requester, but it's important that they be the ones to do it because there's specific formalities associated with how that has to be done. So there's the general rule that everything is public information and members of the public can access it, but there are exceptions to that disclosure. So information that has to be redacted, for example, is one of those exceptions. So dates of birth, most email addresses of members of the public, driver's license, license plate numbers within records, credit card numbers, or for example, any number that would grant access to something of value. So like an insurance policy number, for example, in some instances might be subject to protection, or other banking information would be another example, not just credit card information. HIP information, and more importantly, Texas Medical Records Privacy Act information. So information that is compiled by a doctor in the course of treatment, or diagnostic information related to someone's health that's identified to that person would be another exception to disclosure. And then there are other ones as well that are more discretionary that, for example, relate to attorney-client privilege or internal deliberation. So the key point there is if you think something is questionable, it's very important to make sure that the General Counsel's Office is aware of that, so we can make sure that we are conforming to our duties under the law and also providing the best analysis and support we can for you and the Commission and members of the public. There are a lot of resources on the Public Information Act out there, including the Texas AG's website. There's a training on their website you can do. There's a handbook that's pretty up to date. There's the law itself. We have an internal policy at TDLR related to open records, and of course the General Counsel's Office is available. And then there's also, a fair amount of writing over the years that the AG's office has done on their own website related to the Public Information Act when they roll on request. So those are some additional resources that we would usually use at OGC, but please don't hesitate to look up those handbooks and contact us in the General Counsel's Office if you need any assistance on that. And so that is the conclusion of the training slides I have for today. And so I'm going to quit sharing really quickly. But do we have any? I didn't see or hear any hands or any questions during that. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have. Does anyone have any further questions or want to discuss further? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think that's it for the training, Delia. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, for that overview, trying to keep us all on the straight and narrow. We appreciate our attorneys making sure we're following all the rules.
Thank you so much.
All right, so up next, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was November 2nd, 2021. Would anyone like to move that?
So move.
Amy Camp, thank you. And do I hear a second?
Second, Chevelle Bryant.
Chevelle, thank you, Chevelle. And any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask Delia to take a vote board member by board member.
Yes, ma'am. Cherie Sanders? Miss Andrews?
Maybe muted.
Miss Andrews? We'll come back to her in a minute. Stacy Poteet?
Aye.
Elizabeth Sterling?
Approved.
Dr. Kristen Culp?
Aye.
Dr. Tammy Kemp?
Aye.
Chevelle Bryant?
Aye.
Presiding Officer Sherry Sensibrian?
Aye.
And I will try Cherie Sanders again. Okay,
Oh,
she
she
raised her
is.
hand.
Good.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment, but we did not receive any public comment for this meeting. So we take care of that. Up next, we have staff reports, and today Regina Horton is representing the licensing division.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Regina Horton, and I am one of the team leads for the health professions team, and I will be providing the statistics for Leonard today. You guys should have a copy of the report in front of you to follow along. For speech language pathologists, so far we have fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 805 new licenses. We renewed a total of 6,518 licenses with a total population of 17,989. For speech interns, so far for fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 407 new licenses and renewed a total of 130 licenses with a population of 823. For speech assistants, for fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 399 new licenses and renewed 1,344 licenses with a total population of 4,756. For audiologists, so far for fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 66 new licenses and renewed a total of 568 licenses with a total population of 1,589. Then we have audiologist interns. For fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 33 new licenses and renewed a total of 13 licenses with a total population of 51. And lastly, we have audiologist assistants. For fiscal year 2023, we have issued a total of 14 new licenses and renewed 3 licenses with a total population of 59. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
I know that Katie Bryce has met with the licensing division, and I trust that the licensing division is going to be working on the issue of fingerprinting that's caused a little glitch this summer. So hopefully
Yes.
that will get straightened out because our licensees are concerned, of course,
Yes,
about
of
getting their
course.
licenses on time.
Yes, ma'am. They are currently working enforcement, my enforcement team and division, they are currently working on resolving the issues we're having with our fingerprinting, getting those licenses like renewed and issued on the initial applications. We do send out those fingerprint instructions once we process. However, they are trying to get everything straightened out with that issue for the fingerprints.
Licensees always appreciate
Yes.
very detailed instructions on what to do, so I know that will help.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Education and examination, Michael Strawn.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Michael Strawn. I'm one of the managers for our Education Examination Division. I have a very brief report for you all today. Just jurisprudence examination numbers. Taking a look at everything, you'll kind of notice that we've slightly increased on number of jurisprudence examinations from fiscal year 22 to FY 23. We're right in line where we need to be, and we still have 1 month to report. We are looking at updating all of these jurisprudence examinations as we go through all of our different jurisprudence examinations that we offer. So bringing them up to speed, new information, new look here soon. And so we're going through all those within the next year. With that being said, that concludes my report, and I'm open to any questions y'all may have.
Thank you for the report. For our commissioner who's attending today, and then also for Stacy as a new consumer member, one of the things that's a little different about speech pathology and audiology is that to obtain our licenses, we all take an exam that is not administered by the licensing board. It is the praxis examination that's administered by ETS, the Educational Testing Service. So that's a national standard that we meet. So in this case, our examination division just administers jurisprudence, which is to make sure people understand our rules. And it's a very friendly exam because you can look up the answers right there in the rules. So I think that works pretty well. Next on our list is customer service, and Claudia Enriquez is filling in today and will present the report.
Hi, good morning, board members. My name is Claudia Enriquez, and I'm covering for Patricia Martinez Castellan, who is the manager for this program. As you can see in front of you with the statistics, our call volume did increase for the month of August for this year. For the fiscal year 2022, our highest month for call volume and emails, which are included, was June. So there is a slight increase, actually a pretty big increase as far as the calls and emails that we received for the month of August. But those are all the statistics I have for you. I'm open to any questions you may have.
I think it's always good to remind our licensees that sometimes they can't get an immediate answer, but if you look at the volume, over 7,000 contacts in the month of August alone, just for speech pathology. So that's a lot. So no wonder those folks are really busy.
Yes, it was a total of 4,442 contacts for August.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I was adding everything together, thinking, oh my
Yeah.
goodness. 4,000 is still a lot, though.
It is. Yeah.
I know it keeps the customer service division pretty busy.
Right.
Up next is Enforcement Division with Christopher Funderburg.
Good morning, board members. My name is Chris Funderburg. I'll be presenting enforcement's report today. As you see, these statistics are derived primarily from enforcement's regulatory activities within this profession over the last 2 fiscal years. I'm not going to go over it line by line. I'll just briefly mention that in the average time to close cases in this profession is well under TDLR's average, 92 days versus 216 days. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chris, are you seeing any trends, anything particular that people need to be a lot more careful about?
From my personal experience, no, nothing that really strikes me as something that the profession generally needs to be aware of. I think, the respondents that we do encounter typically are not intentionally, breaching the laws and rules. It tends to be just kind of inadvertent error. And in those cases, we try to do our best to just bring them into compliance rather than seeking to punish.
Right. It looks like lots of paperwork issues often. So just you have to do your notes, do things on time, submit them properly. So
yeah, and we'll always work with individuals if depending on the facts. Again, would rather bring a licensee into compliance or an unlicensed person into licensure than destroy someone's livelihood.
For sure. Right. So any questions for Chris about compliance and violations? Okay. And next we have the compliance division. So Katie and our new person, Erica.
Hi, good morning, board members. My name is Erica Rodriguez. I'm going to be providing the compliance staff report today. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the current projects that we've been working on. So our staff is continuing to assist with implementing bills that were passed during 88th legislative session, including SB 2017 relating to over-the-counter hearing aids. We are also assisting other departments within the agency, such as licensing, customer service, enforcement, with any questions that they may have, as well as addressing daily questions and emails that we receive from our licensees. In regards to our outreach, we have been really busy, which is a great thing. Our staff, Katie and Steve, both attended the Texas Academy of Audiology conference that was in Frisco. And then they also both attended the Texas Speech Language Hearing Association in Austin. Katie also traveled across Texas to several different universities this past spring to provide a presentation to graduating students. Katie also attended the National Council of State Board Examiners conference that was in New Mexico, and she was elected to a 3-year term on the NCSB Board of Directors. So congratulations to Katie. If you do have any outreach opportunities that you would like us to attend and or give a presentation, please contact Katie Bryce and she can get you set up and get you scheduled. That's going to conclude my report for today. If anyone has any questions, I am available to answer them.
I think it's much appreciated to have the outreach to the universities. We can tell them the information, but somehow having someone come from the office seems to stick in their heads a little bit better. And Katie's really has been good about answering questions. So Erica, I assume you're going to pick up that outreach process and be helping us with some of the university presentations.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Right.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great. It really helps just to talk to these young people. They're about to start out on their careers and we don't want any missteps. They need to do all the things they're supposed to for licensing and not get themselves in trouble the first month they're out of school. So we need to make sure they know the rules. Okay, questions for Erica? So if you had tuned out for a minute earlier, Katie explained that she's gotten a promotion. So yay for Katie. And Erica is taking her role. But Erica's not really new. She's been with TDLR for 16 years. So I think that background's going to be great. You know how a TDLR works. And I know Katie will be able to mentor you on all of the craziness that is speech pathology and audiology because we have so many variations of license and lots of rules to learn. But I know you'll do a good job. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
And now from the executive office, Jessica Escobar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and good morning to all of you members. Just wanted to say thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Jessica Escobar, and I am Chief of Staff for TDLR. It's been a bit since we've all met together. November 2021 was your last meeting. So since then, we've had a few things going on. We've had 2 new commissioners appointed. Commissioner Lori High and Commissioner Sujit Draksham have joined us on the commission. And we've also had a couple of retirements since the last meeting. Our Executive Director, Brian Francis, retired in January 31 of last year, and also David Gonzalez, one of our Deputy Executive Directors, also retired. One of our Deputy Executive Directors, Mike Aris-Mendez, has now become our new Executive Director. Also, Christina Kaiser, who was a Deputy Executive Director before, you all knew her from her time in compliance and enforcement. She is now our Senior Deputy Executive Director. So just a little background for you as to what we have going on in the executive suite. I'm going to go into a quick legislative update. The last time you met, we were wrapping up legislative session and going into our bill implementation. We are in that moment again. We just finished our legislative session in May. And so right now we're in the heat of our bill implementation season. So we are going through, we've evaluated what bills we need to implement. We normally track hundreds of bills every year, and they get whittled down to those that actually pass, and we evaluate what is it that we need to implement. So right now we have close to 30 bill implementation teams. That doesn't mean that we got 30 new programs. We do have a couple new things going on, but these bill implementation teams work on things ranging from administrative items like rulemaking and procurement, information technology, but more specifically to things like Senate Bill 2017, which you're going to hear about later on through the process of rulemaking. So we go through that process. Sometimes they're very quick and have quick deadlines. Sometimes they're going to be a little bit more, they have a little bit of a longer runway, and they may take a little bit longer to implement. So that's going to be something our staff is working on. The other big thing that came out of legislative session is our licensing system funding. This is something that we've been working on and is very important to the future of our agency. We were appropriated $32.9 million for the development and procurement of our licensing system. Currently, we're on many different licensing systems. We have right now 38 different programs. And unfortunately, we have multiple systems that run those different licensing programs. So this appropriation will help us to acquire one system that'll get everything all in one place. It's going to be a humongous undertaking. So we have a big group of staff that's going to be working on that. We're going to be working on the procurement. But what that means for you all as our licensees is it'll increase efficiencies for you. You'll have great access to information. You'll be able to do everything online. You'll be able to access information online, and it'll help our staff to be more efficient and be able to help you more quickly. So we're very, very excited about that. This process is not going to be quick. Unfortunately, we wish that it was, but to be done right, it will take us some time. I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Commissioner Lori High. She joined us this morning. We're very lucky to have Commissioner High. She's got a background in the health field, and so she's been joining us for a lot of our health industry meetings. So Commissioner High, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I'd love that, please.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you. I did get a chance to speak earlier. I guess that was at the very start of the meeting.
Thank you. Apologize.
No, I'm so glad to be here. And I really appreciate all of the activities of this advisory board and the time that they spend on all of these important issues, especially with the newest legislative activities that are going on.
Yes, so we're very excited. We're glad that we have our new commissioners, and especially the fact that they've taken such a great and hands-on role with our boards. So if you need anything from us, please reach out. Our advisory board team know how to get a hold of us, and we are here to assist you. We have a great team in compliance division. You've worked with them all, and that won't change. So have a great meeting and have a great weekend.
Thanks for attending and for the update, Jessica. Our next item on the agenda is about our work groups, and Dr. Culp, I believe you are going to report on the work group related to SB 2017.
Are you calling on me? I am
Sure,
not aware
I am.
of this. I am not aware of being ready for any kind of
Okay.
Was it
So
somebody else?
I don't know.
Kristen, it was the work group report. I gave you both of those work group reports.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me check what I have here, and I'll get back to me.
Okay. I'll skip to the other work group report and come back to you in just a minute, Kristen. Okay. So we had two work groups going on. The second one is a standard of care work group about cognitive screening. So we have long had a rule 111.190 about communication screening, but previously it only mentioned language and speech screenings. And because of some concern out in the profession, we added cognition, but the aspect of cognition that can be screened is just cognitive processes that affect communication function. When we are screening, especially some of our elders in long-term care facilities, we need to look not only at their speech and language, and their hearing, but also just at cognitive function. And so we've modified this rule and are recommending this rule modification, actually. Sorry, not modified. We didn't do it. We're recommending that these changes be worked into 111.190. And we will leave that up to the attorneys to put that into the next edits that we make to the rules. Any questions about that? Or Katie, anything I forgot about that?
No, sorry, this is Katie Bryce in compliance, and the work group reports were included in your packets. Dr. Culp, I just emailed it to you again, if you'd like to read that joint rules work group report that was included in the packet.
Okay, I have the compliance division, which is the 111.190 that Sherry was just discussing. The other one, oh, here it is. Okay, so SB 2017 statutory changes to the Texas Occupation Codes of 401 and 402. FDA final rule regarding the over-the-counter hearing aids and prescription hearing aids. The changes affect both the audiologists and hearing instrument fitters programs. The recommendation of the work group is approving the proposed rules as written, discussed in they will now be discussed in the Hearing Instrument Fitters Advisory Board meeting on August, I guess they were on August 30th, and then here on ours today. The proposed changes match the new statutory language that is included in the joint rules.
All right, thank you for that report. Any questions about that proposed rule change? No, I'm sure we'll be talking about it more. Nick Laelis, I think you're up next to talk about the recommendations on some proposed amendments to our rules.
Great, thank you so much, Presiding Officer Cyprian. Let me start off and just give kind of a roadmap on this before I start sharing my screen. That way, it can kind of lead directly off of, or I guess to kind of take the lead directly off of what we just finished discussing, and that is the implementation of some federal changes and rules and implementation of some recent legislation in the form of SB 2017. So really, the crux of these rule changes, and as was noted, the joint work group did meet and give some feedback, and I should say that kind of first on some of the language in this. So it has been, this copy of the rules we're discussing, today, has already been considered by a joint work group, and that's one piece of information to consider. And in addition, what we're really implementing here is driven by changes in statutory language done by SB 2017 to harmonize state statute and by extension our rules at the department with the changes by the in the FDA hearing aid rule. Specifically, the proposed rules we're going to be talking about today implement changes to the Occupations Code and Chapter 401 by that bill, which is SB 2017 during the last regular session, and implement changes by the US FDA in relation to their final rule regarding over-the-counter hearing aids and prescription hearing aids. And then also, because of some of the repeal and change in federal regulation, we are in turn making sure that our state side rules incorporate that repeal as well in a specific way. And I'll clarify that more because it relates to requirements related to medical statements for sales of hearing instruments to individuals under 18 years of age, where there was previously some generalized federal guidance about when statements or waivers were necessary, and then that was gotten rid of and unenforced by FDA. And we still have some requirements that are in state statute that have not changed. So some rule language has been modified to accommodate kind of that new interface between the two. And in addition, like I said, there's some cleanup in the rules too, where there were citations, for example, to previously existing federal rules that have now been repealed or replaced, and so those have been cleaned up a little bit. And then here and there, we see some clarification of, for example, the titles of rules in order to make sure that we are owning in on, for example, the new definition of hearing instrument, the new definition of over-the-counter hearing aid, and clarifying those as well. So that being said, let me make sure I hit all of the high notes before I get started sharing a document. But like I said, the FDA hearing aid rule rule was designed to provide easier access to over-the-counter hearing aids and remove restrictions on the sale of those devices, and to remain consistent with federal law. State statutes and rules regarding the sale of hearing instruments require changes to reflect the new category of over-the-counter hearing aids and provide a regulatory framework consistent with federal law and the changes to state statute. So as you'll see, a lot of these changes are definitional. Where there are new provisions, those provisions, as I'll reiterate, are taken as close to word for word from the state statute as we can. So we're hewing close to the legislative intent and being as clear as we can, maybe offering a little tweak here and there to ensure that things are specifically clear for our licensed community. And like I said, there's a little bit of cleanup in language here and there, but not all that much. All right, well, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started sharing the PDF. Give me just a second to get that done. Here we go. Okay, so to start off, we are making changes to some definitions consistent with what was in the changes to the statute. And so in 111.2, I'm scrolling kind of quick past stuff that didn't change, so I can just make sure I highlight what did change. There is statutorily driven changes to the definition of fitting and dispensing hearing instruments, including prescribing, ordering, or authorizing use of hearing instruments. That's additional language that's underlined, and providing any necessary post-fitting counseling. That's additional language that was added in the statute, so we added it in our rules to reflect that. The new definition of hearing aid, which is something that comes from actually that's designed to hew close to statute, but also the federal rules related to it, and then changes in turn that needed to be made to the definition of hearing instrument consistent with the provision that's cited in federal regulations. So those two definitional changes, or I should say really the addition and the change, are driven by an effort to mirror what's in the state statute and the federal regulations. So there's not a lot of discretion there because those have been set out in other areas of law, and we are adopting those definitions for our purposes. We see some renumbering that's occurring in these other definitions. Please, if I am going too fast or if I am glossing something over, I'm happy to pause. I realize I'm going kind of quickly through the definition stuff. There's a new definition for over-the-counter hearing aid that, of course, refers back to the meeting in federal law and gives a citation to it, and that's consistent with state statute. We saw a revision to the term sale, and that incorporates statutory language in addition. And I should say this kind of right at the very top is that the effort, of course, is made to mirror this definitions language whenever possible to the language in Chapter 112 as well. So you'll see that these changes are made to harmonize with changes that would be proposed to the fitters and dispensers rules as well. So there's a change in the language for the definition of the word sale. And those are really the definitional changes that, as I said before, are largely not matters of discretion. Those are things that are taken either from changes in federal law or changes in the state statute, and we are incorporating those definitions so we have a common language that we're speaking in accordance with those statutes and adopting the meaning that we're supposed to adopt from those state statutes. If there are no questions, I'm happy to move on to a new section 111.3. But I'd like to pause intentionally and see if there's any clarification, any questions at this point. Okay, I don't see any, so thank you. I'll go ahead and move on. So a new 111.3, this is for the most part taken, and when I say for the most part, I mean taken almost verbatim from changes in the state statute that relate to this new category of over-the-counter hearing aids. And as you read over this new section, what it does is make sure that the 111, the Chapter 111, doesn't apply to certain services, certain activities related to over-the-counter hearing aids, and that's contained in little a, And in addition, we did make sure to clarify the language in A as well as in E. So we said, except as provided in this section, this chapter does not apply. And that's consistent again with the statutory language we've been given through SB 2017 and mirrors this effort through the FDA's hearing aid rule to ensure the availability of over-the-counter hearing aids. New 111.3b clarifies that a person's not required to obtain a license to engage in those activities that are described in A. And section new C discusses titles and licensing as well. D discusses the lack of necessity of a prescription supervision order involvement or in any way of a licensee and for those actions that are covered in A, or for a consumer to access over-the-counter hearing aids. And new E, which is again something that is adopted from statute, but we did tweak the language a little bit to try to be more specific, states that a person licensed under this chapter, so one of our licensees, may service, market, sell, dispense, provide customer service for, or distribute over-the-counter hearing aids, but those activities don't exempt a person licensed under this chapter from any applicable provision of this chapter unrelated to those activities in 111.3a. And the reason why we put a little bit of additional language in there at the tail end of E was to ensure that there was clarity that if a licensee engages in activity unrelated to what's described in A, then if there are rules applicable to that conduct, they continue to apply. And that general rules, for example, continuing education, continue to apply to people who have licenses, and the mere act of selling over-the-counter hearing aids doesn't take them out of that universe of rules, for example. So we did incorporate some feedback from the work group in relation to that to make sure we could clarify that rules that apply to other activities that aren't related to those actions discussed related to over-the-counter hearing aids continue to apply to those other actions. What we're really trying to accept here in 111.3 is just those actions we've enumerated related to the sale and other actions that are described herein for over-the-counter hearing aids, and that those are outside the scope of 111.3. That's a mouthful. So now I'll see a little pause because there may be some discussion here and some questions. So I wanted to pause and see if we had any. Okay. I'm so sorry if someone is raising their hand. I cannot see it because I'm sharing the PDF document. So please jump in. If not, I'll go ahead and move on. But if there is someone that wants to go ahead and chime in, please indicate that. Okay.
No one has raised their hand, Nick.
Okay. Thank you. Then if no one's raised their hand is what I heard, so I will go ahead and move on. Excellent. Okay. There are some in 111.201. There are additional changes. You'll see in little one, there's what we call cleanup. It's change of citation to the new hearing aid rule, and we took out the prior citation to the sections of federal law that don't govern this anymore, that don't exist anymore. We changed some verbiage, so it says ensure instead of insure, which is a minor kind of typographical change. And this is the moderately, I wouldn't say more complex, but more nuanced topic I discussed earlier under 111.201, little 3, which is that previously there was a requirement to receive a written statement before selling a hearing instrument that's signed by a licensed physician, preferably one who specializes in diseases of the ear, that states the client's hearing loss has been medically evaluated during the preceding 6-month period, and the client may be a candidate for a hearing instrument. And so, although there were changes related to that medical statement requirement, changes to the waiver that came in federal law, for example, there is still a state statute that requires that for persons under the age of 18, so clients under the age of 18. So what we've done to kind of incorporate the fact that as a general matter, that requirement's no longer there in federal law for everyone, for all clients, but there is still a requirement for specifically this one universe of clients, so persons under the age of 18. We've modified the language of the existing rule to make sure that we are only requiring that in our rule for those people which specifically by state statute it's required for, and not everyone generally. So in order to make those modifications, what we've done is we've clarified the first portion of the rule to say if the client's under age 18, and then in addition, at the tail end of that, we said a written statement is not required for clients 18 years of age or older. Those are friendly changes, or at least that last sentence is a friendly change driven by the work group. So I'm appreciative of that. So that is what that kind of nuanced change is there, to make sure that we are still adhering to state statute requiring that evaluation for persons under the age of 18, but as a general matter, we're reflecting that requirement no longer being there in the hearing aid rule, or in the federal law, I should say, at this point. So that is that again, it's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm happy to take a pause and try to discuss or receive any feedback on that. Okay. Thank you. And I'm not seeing anything or hearing anything, so I'm going to go right along. Thank you all so much. Y'all are making this very easy for me. I appreciate that. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the joint rule. And there are some changes to the joint rule, and that's why this work group was very beneficial, of course, to hold prior to this meeting. And so generally the changes you're going to see here are just clarifying, really, especially in light of the changes, for example, to the definition of hearing instrument or the new category of over-the-counter hearing aids. For example, 111.220 that we just clarified in little b, kind of, we added some language where instead of just saying guidelines for a 30-day consecutive day trial period, we added for a hearing instrument in there, so it'd be clear what that 30-day trial period pertained to. And in addition, we modified B1 to add similar language saying related to a hearing instrument when it describes the scope of what the rule is going to apply to. So again, those are just minor clarifying changes that are meant to make sure we're being consistent with overall changes to the rules consistent with SB 2017 and providing some clarity. We did make a change and remove the general requirement to maintain as part of, I believe that's the section concerning contract, to reflect the changes in federal law related to waiver, and the fact that those provisions had been, my understanding is many of them are unenforced. That provision had been unenforced for many years, and that was taken out and was part of the final hearing aid rule. That section, former section 6, has been removed, so the section that said a copy of the written forms related to waiver has been taken out, so that's no longer required, and that's a change that had been suggested, I believe, previously to us as well. So we're making that to conform to changes in federal law. And in accordance with that, to make sure that we're being consistent with those instances where a medical statement is required or a statement evaluation is required, in the record keeping section, we did clarify rather than take out completely, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling a little bit if anybody's having trouble following. In D3, whereas previously it said medical evaluation or waiver of evaluation is one of the documents that needed to be retained under record keeping, because those forms are not always going to be required in every instance now because of the changes I've described in federal law, but they will be required in those instances where, for example, the client is under 18. So what we modified our rule to say is that medical evaluation or waivers evaluation have to be retained if they're provided. So in those instances where someone is required to obtain those, for example, if clients under 18 is the one I'm really focused on here, then those would still need to be retained, but there's not an affirmative requirement to obtain those if that affirmative requirement doesn't exist somewhere else in our rules or in a statute or law. So we're just requiring them to keep it if they get it. So those are the proposed changes to Chapter 111. I will keep my screen up in case there's something we want to go back to. But as I said, we were lucky enough to have a joint work group, which was very productive. Many of them are taken, actually almost all of them are taken directly from changes in SB 2017 or changes in federal law related to the final hearing aid rule. And so although we have incorporated some tweaks here and there, they really do come from the implementation of legislation, and we take the language as much as possible from that legislation. So, all right.
Nick, this is Sherry Sensibrian. So we follow the usual procedure today for the board to review this and probably propose that these be implemented, but what would be the time frame?
So that's an excellent question. So what we would be looking to do today would be, we haven't proposed these in the Texas Register yet. So our step here would be to recommend that we go ahead with proposal and publication in the Texas Register at this point, as of course you all know. The timeline for this is that we are aiming for consistent with the statute. There's a little provision in SB 2017 that says certain types of changes that SB 2017 asks us to make in our rules have to be adopted by December 1st, 2023, which is, in summer it may not seem that soon, but it's already a few days into September. So we are trying to get these done as quickly as we can, and that's why we're looking, if we can at all, to get a recommendation to go ahead and propose these rules. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's what I wondered. If we were trying to meet a deadline, I thought there was a federal deadline, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
Great. Okay, any questions for Nick? If not, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the proposed rules as presented so that they can be published and be available for public comment through the register.
This is Tammy Camp, and I move that we adopt the rules or recommend the rules as proposed to be published in the register.
Thank you. Moved by Dr. Camp. And do I hear a second?
I'll second. Kristen Culp.
Seems appropriate, Dr. Culp, for an audiologist to second that. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll ask Delia to do a roll call for the vote.
Yes, ma'am. Nick, can you stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody? Thank
Certainly.
you.
You're very welcome.
Cherise Andrews? She raised her hand. Stacy Poteet?
Aye.
Elizabeth Sterling? Miss Sterling, can you unmute your mic? We'll come back to her in a second. Dr. Kristen Culp?
Aye.
Dr. Tammy Camp?
Aye.
Cheval Bryant?
Aye.
Presiding Officer Sherry Sensibrian?
Aye.
Okay, let's go back. Ms. Sterling, can you hear me? Ms. Sterling is not responding.
Let's go ahead and mark her as abstaining from the vote, Del.
I'm sorry?
Let's go ahead and put her that she abstained from the vote since we can't see her voting. Thank you.
All right, motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we need to see if there are recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting. The one item that I wanted to follow up on, Katie will probably have to prompt me on this. We did have a recommendation from a work group, I think last year, about, it was the issue of having to have your license with you all the time, but as an alternative, you could show it on your phone because you can look up your license on the website. And that was a work group recommendation, but I don't think we made rule changes last year, so I'm not sure that that one got implemented. Katie, can you remember?
Yeah, we did discuss that. Oh, here's Wendy. I'll let her cover it.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy Pele, Senior Assistant General Counsel. Yes, the advisory board, we did get a recommendation from the work group at a previous meeting, and those recommended changes will be incorporated into a future rulemaking, kind of like the recommendations you did today on the cognitive screening. So we'll get all of those pieces with the different work groups rolled into a future rulemaking.
Okay. Anyone else have agenda items, things that you know are coming up later this year, or hot topics you've heard from licensees?
Sherry, this is Kristen Culp, was there a call for another audiologist for the board? That I didn't hear of that, or did I miss that?
I'll let Katie update
We
us.
have a spot open.
Looking.
Okay.
This is Katie Bryce. That really falls under advisory boards, but I know that there was that there is a vacancy and that there was the application process is posted on our webpage.
But Katie, following all the rules that we need to follow, what can board members do to help us get another audiologist?
I would say reach out to anyone you know who might be interested. And just
to direct them to the application.
Yes.
It might be a good follow-up to the minutes from today's session, Celia, about that application and where people can apply, so we can get
Right.
another audiologist.
And they can contact us in advisory boards, pdlr.texas.gov, I'm sorry. And they can, we can direct them to the link where they can apply.
And is that on the homepage? I don't remember seeing it on our licensure homepage. Is there an announcement about a vacancy? I don't remember seeing.
There should be one.
Okay, I'll look. I don't remember seeing it, but that's another thing that might be helpful. People do actually look at that page. And so
This
you
is
know,
on
that would be good to see.
TDLR. I wanted to share my screen with y'all just so we can have a clear idea of our website and where to go for advisory board vacancies. This is our main website here. And as you see from the homepage, you can click on this volunteer for an advisory board, and it gives you a list of all of the different boards that we have and all the vacancies that we have on each board. So if you
Great.
scroll down, you see that we do actually have the speech language pathologist label listed here, but we do have that vacancy for the audiologist as well. And I believe, sorry for scrolling so fast, you can click on this link to submit an application, or you can email us advisory.board@pdlr.texas.gov for information on that as well.
Okay, great. So we'll just try to let audiologists know. Tammy, it looks like you're raising your hand.
I just was going to state that while TDLR has been the managing this license for a while, I don't think it would be intuitive to most people who hold these licenses to go to the TDLR website to look for an opening on those advisory boards. And so I would think that it would be wise to have it also on the website specifically that are speech language pathology and audiology if it's not.
That's where they're more likely to go, right? So, and the audiology wasn't listed, so I don't think that will help us too much. So yeah, I think that would be great if we could check our page. I don't remember seeing that. And then also just through your connections, let people know that we do have an opening. Other items that you can think of for our agenda for the next meeting? Anything from staff? Okay, well, we'll put things on the agenda just as they come up, since we usually have some time now between meetings. And obviously, we will not set a meeting date today. We'll follow the same procedure that's worked pretty well, where Delia will contact everybody and kind of get an idea of when you're available to meet. Is there any other business that needs to come before this board today? Something I skipped? Anything? Don't hear anything, and I don't see any raised hands. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 10:33. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we'll see you next time.